Well, hello, powerful people, and thank you to everyone for joining us for AI and the Future of Workplace Democracy. Today's event continues the Rebooting Democracy in the Age of AI lecture series, which is hosted by the Burns Center for Social Change at Northeastern University. You just heard Orly and me talking about it a little bit. Throughout the series, we have been talking with innovative designers, thinkers, change makers, people who are working to do democracy differently in the age of artificial intelligence. If you'd like to learn more about the series, and I encourage you to do that. Also, if you'd like to watch previous talks or sign up for future events, if you'd like to read our blog, both about the issues and about the series, you can learn more at rebootdemocracy.ai, www.rebootdemocracy.ai. Go there. Now, after you've gone there, I want you to go to poweratwork.us because this event is co-hosted by the Power at Work blog, which is a project of the Burns Center. The Power at Work blog promotes a worker-centered discourse around worker power unions and worker collective action. So if you'd like to learn more about the Power at Work blog or read any of or view any of our content, I urge you again to go to poweratwork.us. So when you go there, please subscribe. That way we can keep you up to date on the content we are posting, including this event. We will post this event on the Power at Work blog. It's now going out live over the Burns Center YouTube channel, and it will live there as well. Now, before I introduce our guest, let me tell our live audience that we enthusiastically welcome your questions and comments. Just type them into the Q&A function, that's at the bottom of your screen. You can all see it there. You do not have to wait until the end of my dialogue with Orly. If you waited for Orly and me to finish our dialogue, you could be here for a week or two. We've been talking for years and years and years. Post when the idea comes to you, particularly if it's relevant to the subject that Orly and I are talking about, and if I can find a way to work your question or comment into the conversation, I assure you I will try to do that. Those I don't get to during the course of the dialogue, I will try to leave time at the end for additional questions. Okay, our guest today is Orly Lobel, and we're going to be talking with her about her very smart, rich, and self-described contrarian book, The Equality Machine: Harnessing Digital Technology for a Brighter, More Inclusive Future. Orly is the Warren Distinguished Professor of Law at the University of San Diego. She's the director of the Center for Employment and Labor Law. She is the award-winning author of several books and a leading scholar in behavioral law and policy, and regularly advises government and the tech sector and others in private industry and competition law and tech. She's already had a significant influence on public policy. For example, her book, Talent Wants to Be Free, was cited extensively in the Federal Trade Commission's new final rule banning non-compete agreements in employment. And that's just one example. Another of her books takes on the myth of Barbie. So I encourage you to take a look at that one as well. The Equality Machine has already won a lot of awards and accolades. I'll just go through a few of them very, very quickly. Orly's book was on the award long list for outstanding works of literature. It was named a top book by The Economist, the San Diego Union Tribune, Legal Theory, and the Boston Consulting Group. Stanford Medical School has assigned it as its mandatory summer book for all of its medical students. They must love that. Several large corporations like Johnson & Johnson and MetLife and Zoom have made Orly's book a selected reading for their employees. It's been reviewed very widely and very favorably in a number of places, and it's been featured in a long list of magazine and newspaper articles and podcasts, including the forthcoming Power at Work blogcast. And for our native Mandarin speakers, The Equality Machine has a Chinese publisher and should be issued in China very soon. So you can get, if your first language is Mandarin, or if you want to test out your understanding of Mandarin, this is your opportunity to do that. So with that long-winded introduction finished, with all of the logistics described, I want to turn it over to you, Orly, to take as much time as you would like to introduce our audience to your terrific book.
Thank you. Thank you for that lovely introduction, but you omitted a few things that are really relevant to our conversation here. So I want to say before we dig in that it's a particular pleasure to be in conversation with you, Seth Harris, who you probably remember, but I remember this very well. I think of you as one of the first people who were very warm and welcoming me 2 decades ago into academia. I was a baby, newbie, aspiring law professor, and you were at one of the schools that gave me an offer, and you were just so generous in introducing me to the world of employment law, which is my academic main home and kind of substantive focus, even with the equality machine, and as I expand to many different sectors and issues on tech policy. And then later on, we had the privilege, or I've had the honor of co-authoring with you another book that you didn't mention, which is the Employment Law and Economics Encyclopedia. And the last time I think I saw you in person was you and I hiking the Great Wall of China together in Beijing. So it's nice to be here, not in person, remotely, but here at Northeastern. I also saw Beth Novick on the call, and I thank you as well, Beth, for organizing this and leading your terrific center. I want to tell you a little bit about the equality machine. Seth already said that I am self-describing my positioning in writing the book as contrarian, and I laughed that in 2024, it's a little awkward and I think problematic to be a contrarian in being excited and cautiously optimistic about technology that is here and that is moving in such rapid speed. And so I do think that we are, and this is the motivation for me writing the book, that we are at a time where there's not only huge changes that are underway, just really things that are all around us, that are the developments in AI and digital technology that are changing every sector in our lives, from work that we'll talk about, but education and health, and even the ways that we organize our families and our intimate relations, algorithms that there's chapters in the book about algorithms of desire and sex tech, and how, matching how our preferences and everything, and consumerism and in our exchanges and connections are all being shaped by digital technology and our connectivity. But not only that, we're at a moment where I think we're having skewed conversations, and that's where the equality machine comes in, because I have been part of the research and the public debates, the conversations, the policy thinking on digital technology for a while now, well beyond kind of the big hype of AI. AI has actually been around. There's been kind of this acceleration, and there's been, of course, big changes in. So the equality machine actually came out basically the same weeks of the first version open to the public by OpenAI, ChatGPT. And so, of course, there's kind of generative AI that's changing a lot of things, but we've had a lot of the changes that we will talk about bubbling around for a long while. And what I saw in the public conversation is a pendulum shifting from optimism to pessimism that didn't really reflect. There was kind of this these very binary or dichotomous conversations that were either just overly excited, the kind of the tech optimism, or overly scared, alarmist. I think that we, in recent years, have shifted to the tunnel vision of the alarmist and focusing a lot on the wrongs and harms and problems and the kind of books that I was in some ways responding to that became very much capturing the public imagination, had titles like Automating Inequality and Weapons of Math Destruction and surveillance capitalism and all of these very big threats that were presented and are presented to us. And the contrarian part is not at all to deny that there are risks and that there are problems. The purpose of the equality machine is to organize our thinking and to have a more analysis-based and fact-based, empirical research-based conversation that is rational and just balanced and nuanced about the risks and the opportunities, the costs and benefits, the harms and promises and opportunities as we think about shifting different functions of our lives to automation. And really to just kind of make this call for action of saying, look, we all have feelings about how the world is changing around us. But if you are a person who actually cares about equality and the social good and the kind of public options and where we're heading, then in fact it's perversely really counterproductive to just focus on the harms. There's kind of this other level in the book of saying, it's very easy to just point to all these wrongs, but the train has left the station. The genie has, left the bottle. We are here. We'll talk, you and I, Seth, about, what companies are doing with AI in all the stages of employment. It's here. So it's kind of these two things that, one, just focusing on the wrong is just, that's not correct, because there's a lot of good that is being done, that can be done, and we have to, and we'll talk more about this, but there's kind of this call all the time in the book of adopting a comparative lens, because the human decision making and the status quo is deplete with, it's just pervaded with problems itself. So adopting a comparative lens and really thinking about what we're improving upon, or what are the comparative advantages. And second, we actually have control, and we have abilities to direct the technology for good, to harness it for inclusion and equality and well-being. But if we have these conversations that are so skewed, then we're just creating this vicious cycle where the kind of tech bros that we're boxing, others who are criticizing are kind of saying, well, they don't care about all these social issues, so they'll just continue to design without it. And then others are kind of positioning themselves as just saying, stop, slow it down, it's all bad. So this book is really kind of an intervention there of saying, we all have to think carefully, we all have to be informed, we all have this mandate to be part of the conversation, part of the thinking, and part of the direction of the technology for a better future.
That's a great summary and overview of the book. And so I want to come into this conversation by starting really, 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 really big, right? So let me make a really big statement, and then I'm going to ask you a question based on that statement, picking up on what you were just talking about your motivation in writing the book and also what the book discusses. So I'll offer my view that as a general matter, technology tools don't really have a moral or ethical component. There can be morality about how they're built, how they're chosen. But with a few exceptions, technology can be used to accomplish good things, and it can be used to accomplish bad things, as you were just saying. And often the same tool is capable of doing both good things and bad things. There are some exceptions, like there are some weapon systems that I think are probably exceptions to that statement, but the exceptions I think are really few, and certainly not in the labor and employment law space, or even in most of the technology space. So your book is a nice illustration of that. You make a really compelling argument that artificial intelligence can be used to accomplish some very good things. One of the ones that you highlight is eliminating bias and promoting equality in labor markets and the workplace. But you also open the book with what was, for me, a very deeply poignant story of how your daughter Eleanor's life has been improved and maybe even saved. I'll let you articulate whether that's how you would characterize it, by medical technology, smart medical technology. And then you build on that anecdote in chapter 5 by talking in more detail and more expansively about medical applications for AI. And I found that to be immensely powerful, not just because I know your family, but also because it just is a powerful, powerful story. And there are millions like it now. But we also have the model of the internet, right? Which has done a lot of terrific things. It's connected us globally. It's facilitated mass communications, mass commerce, broader democracy. My colleague Beth has written very extensively about the role of the internet in democracy, and it's helped to create millions, maybe tens of millions of jobs, maybe hundreds of millions if you include jobs around the world in businesses. And so there are a lot of really good things, but the internet has also been used to undermine democracy. It's been used to spread disinformation. It's been used to promote child sexual abuse. There are many bad uses of the internet. So I know you don't think it's inevitable. You didn't write this book to make the case that it's inevitable that AI is only going to do good things. So, although you could disagree with me if you want, I think I read the book closely enough to come to that conclusion. So the question for you then is, what will be the mechanism that is used to ensure that AI is used for good and not for bad? How will we get from here to there? Your goal, your optimistic vision, how do we make sure that that's where we end up, rather than in the internet that parts of the sewer that parts of the internet are?
Yeah, I mean, that's the big overarching question, right? That we all need to be talking about, and that is my starting point. So absolutely, you read very closely, good reader, Seth, and absolutely, I am with you that AI is a tool. Technology is a tool. It's always been different capabilities that we humans can use for good and bad, that it doesn't have a moral characteristic in and of itself. I think that the metaphors that we've actually been using for AI are problematic in that sense, because if you've kind of looked at like the moratorium letter that was issued after the big LLMs, the recent calls of, well, the generative AI, the chat GPTs, maybe we should slow down the research and applications. And there was in that letter a metaphor that AI is like the nuclear bomb. And that I think is problematic, because that does have a negative connotation. It's maybe a better lens is it's like nuclear power, which has, again, good and bad, but and you can actually look at the historical debates that we've been having, and including now the contemporary realities of how we're using nuclear power, this kind of big fear that, again, is not necessarily based, I'm not an expert on nuclear power, but my understanding is that we've been slowing down some really positive applications for our environment because of irrational fears, and not kind of adapting the right, because it has that real scary, connotation of nuclear bombs. AI is way, out there differently, not a one thing, not a single technology. And that's why, your question is of course the billion-dollar question. It's a hard question, but it's also not a question that you can just answer as a one-shot thing, because what I try to unpack in the book is that when we talk about AI, there's so many different technologies and applications. So all the way, from kind of computational powers of just digitizing formulas that we've always used. So pretty low level algorithms, for example, applications of sentencing, and I go into using Compass and other software that helps judges in deciding about sentencing. And I actually show that unlike the first I think reports about how these are biased algorithms, that they produce skewed results for Black defendants versus white defendants. They're actually, I mentioned this before, they're outperforming a lot of human judges who are biased. And as I think you and I both, have taught employment discrimination, we're acutely aware that we all have implicit biases. We have conscious biases, definitely in some places in this country. The justice system, the criminal justice system, is very broken. So again, thinking about using those kinds of algorithms and looking at their performance versus the status quo, and then all the way to the very powerful applications right now that are generating content, that are replacing a lot of human functions. I talk about social robots that can convey emotional, not only convey, but also detect emotional exchanges. And you mentioned, the health applications that I think are really, if you want to, if some of our listeners want to start digging into all the amazing potential of AI, I think health is particularly kind of the low-hanging fruit because of several things. One is that we are in a reality where, especially in the United States, access to health, to good healthcare, is not a reality for a lot of people, and we have huge inequities of the kinds of services and just medical care that we have. There's a lot of scarcity, and it's a profession, the medical profession and healthcare professionals in general, the professional where there's a lot of burnout, and we have just a talent dearth. So thinking about changes is important. And then the opportunities of scaling and learning, not just scaling, so scaling just access and reducing costs is huge, but then learning, when I'm researching the biggest breakthroughs that are happening right now in medicine, they're happening with the use of AI, from basic knowledge, science, discovering new proteins, discovering new treatments, to the day-to-day 24/7 care, like what you describe in diabetes care, autonomous systems that are making decisions, talking to two different devices like an insulin pump plus a continuous glucose monitor, and really alleviating not only the doctor error, but also patient error. So those are huge opportunities. And the reason that the kind of, on top of all that, the other reason that I think with healthcare, it's perhaps easier for us to all kind of come together and talk about this, is that your initial question is, well, AI doesn't have, or technology doesn't have, a moral compass. It's us, and implicit in this is it's us, that we, humans will always need to continue to make hard choices. And a lot of the work that I do in the book is to show that, we've always had to make hard choices. We've always had tensions in our democratic societies and our democratic systems between different normative values, between different social goals that we care about. And that sometimes, you can't get everything at the same time. And that different countries, different democratic communities can draw the lines in different ways. So you will have tensions between privacy and equality. You'll have tensions between speech and safety. We're experiencing all of this very acutely right now, and we have to make these choices. And so with health, I think that in some ways it's easier to all get together. We kind of have these benchmarks and more clear, outcomes.
Objective, there are objective metrics, right?
Objective metrics. We can monitor them. We can learn. And it's still something that I'm actually, I just gave this week a talk to executives in Japan, executives of pharma. And there is a lot of this question of, privacy and health and biometrics, and the EU has different stances than, like other places, and in the United States also. I think one of the things that I also say in the book that is, I think, quite controversial, and we can talk about this, is that we've been privileging privacy over some of these other goals. And I care very much about privacy. I'm on the board of the Future of Privacy Forum, which is, based in DC, where you are. And I think it's, it's a very important right, just a civil right that we have. But like other rights, it has to be balanced with other things, and that we shouldn't be like just sold on the idea that privacy and it, becomes really challenged with these newfound capabilities of mining through so much data, that one of the things that a lot of people fear with AI is that loss of privacy. I mentioned, surveillance capitalism, all that.
Right.
But again, I think we are too much been indoctrinated that privacy always protects, and it always protects the vulnerable, and that's simply not correct. And I show this especially with health. In the book, I go through like decades and really centuries of historical exclusion of different demographics, and definitely of women, from clinical trials, from FDA approval systems, and we are at a moment where we can correct so much of that skewing, and we can count what matters. We can learn from integration, and so we can get a lot of the different values of improving well-being, improving our lifespans, improving our quality of life, improving education, having privacy, having speech rights, equality. But at some point, we can't get everything at the same time. And what I think and that's always been true. This is nothing new in that. What I see with technology is an opportunity to expose some of those tensions, make them a little bit more quantifiable, mitigate some of those tensions. Actually, with what I said with privacy, I think kind of, if we have more of an informed conversation, we can see that there are lots of great developments in securing data and using as training data information that then is anonymous and not identifiable, and so we can get kind of both, and that's something part of the excitement. But to your bigger point, it's all going to be very much context specific, field specific. Like if we talk about what's happening with the transportation industry and truck drivers, that's a question. How do we think about automation and self-driving trucks and autonomous vehicles, and the labor market, and distributive justice, and those are decisions that technology is not going to be making for us. It's us going to be making those decisions, and we need to have those conversations explicitly we need to have them sooner rather than later, because as I said, perversely, we're just saying, oh, this is all bad. We're losing a lot of that momentum, and we're going to just let it all, and it's quite the opposite. It's not that I think that it's all going to be sunny and bright. I actually think that if we don't do anything and we just are fearful, very bad things, as you mentioned, a lot of bad things can happen.
Right. So, Daniel and Saul, I see your questions. I'm going to try to work them in. I want to turn to a question um, that brings this closer to the question of worker power, which is a focus of the Power at Work blog and the Burns Center. So I'm really eager to learn more about how you think artificial intelligence is going to play into questions of worker power and in particularly workplace democracy. This is a democracy labor lecture series. So in chapter 4 of the book, you talk about how AI can play a vital role in detecting and preventing sexual harassment, which is undeniably an important and good thing. And in earlier parts of the book, you talk about how bots might be able to help people with workplace negotiations and how AI can reduce or remove bias from algorithmic hiring or even old style human-driven hiring. Daniel makes the point that AI can be used to reduce bias, but there are also examples of how AI can actually hide bias within algorithms. So, do you think that AI is going to make individual workers more powerful in their dealings with employers? Or are these tools going to focus more on employers either making more profit off their workers or just avoiding liability as a way of saving money?
Right. So again, I mean, it's always been going to be the case that I'll answer, it can be both, and it depends, like a good, law school hypo. I'm not gonna, just offer you a simplistic, yeah, it's all empowering. But I think there are a lot of opportunities that we need to leverage, especially, people like you, who's, are leaders in solidarity and the labor movement. And so yes, absolutely right that there've been, the early reports, part of, I was talking and alluding to this, that I got very frustrated with a lot of the reported kind of how the media was talking about what's happening with AI that was just not accurate. So it's true that AI can hide a lot of bias. I think that there are really bad ways to automate some functions of the employment process. And one of the reported, the kind of rehashed stories that you keep hearing, even though this is a decade-old story, is about Amazon trying to automate its hiring, like application sorting process. And the reported story, which is interesting enough, like even John Oliver, that did very recently a segment about AI, he was still telling that same story, and it's such an outdated story, and it's also not told in full. So here's the story that maybe many of you have heard, because it keeps, getting brought back, is that Amazon tried to replace its HR in sorting, who gets a job. And it turned out that this algorithm hiring app was just recommending white men who played lacrosse who were named Jared. Yeah, clearly a really bad system and really biased system. What is clear is that one, there are many better ways to do this kind of sorting, and we know why this happened, because this initial first attempt to create the system was Amazon just telling the algorithm, here's all the data of who was hired in the past, and once you're doing that, you're just creating an algorithm that learns about human bias and amplifies it. And just like, oh, this is who Amazon has always liked more, which is less women and less diversity. So that's a really bad way. That's what actually in the CS fields, like they call exploitation algorithms that just exploit patterns from the past and replicate them. So we know that, when data is skewed, when data is biased, when human practices have not reflected, talent in a good way, then we're not going to have a very successful design with exploitation algorithms. So the technology and the design has been moving forward, and there are, and I explore this in the kind of the first chapters about work. There are designs that are called exploration algorithms that look for under kind of like not what was done in the past, but under valued talent, different ways that look at different kinds of qualities that we had not thought about, and then even more importantly, I think the gold standard today is using two algorithms that are constantly operating together. One is doing a lot of sorting and recommendations, and then the second one is constantly checking for diversity or skewed recommendations and correcting for it. So in that sense, what I mentioned about kind of looking at the comparative advantage, one of the things, you hear a lot about the fear of the black box of AI being, not explainable or we can't understand it. And, in some way, in the kind of a pure literal way, it's true that we're not going to be able to understand the most advanced algorithms, because some of the value that they bring is by their pure kind of their sheer power that's much more advanced than ours. That's part of what we're excited about. So we can't kind of throw that away. But there's been a lot of advancements on explainable AI, and especially on all of the kind of infrastructure of audits and assessments, and in that sense, there's actually a lot more opportunity than comparatively like looking at an HR person and saying, oh, they seem to be biased, and what do you do with it? So again, as somebody who's been teaching employment law and employment discrimination for many years now, and I serve as an expert witness in different cases, I can see, like, you can point to somebody who's a bad boss. You can point to somebody who's doing all sorts of clearly, problematic decisions or behaviors. And then, as we all know, that the litigation can correct some things. The organization can oust somebody specific, but overall, it's very sticky and very hard to correct, corporate culture and organizational behavior, and certainly human bias, where we know that we're often unaware of our own reasoning and perceptions. So here we have a technology that actually has a paper trail, a digital paper trail that we constantly can monitor. It is kind of free of intentions and motivations, and in fact, if some of our listeners are interested in employment discrimination, how we've thought about it, I go in the book into how we've always had this as kind of an discrimination lens of, do not consider, it's kind of the color blind, do not have a discriminatory motive, is the way that our legal system has been set up. And I'm offering, and this is certainly controversial in today's political climate and our current courts, because we have this idea that affirmative action is something specific, but we are at a moment that, going back to what I said before, that the more we know, the more we can actually correct, and we can get rid of this idea that all we want is just privacy and not feed more information to technology. We actually might have to shift to an idea of feeding the algorithms more and more, and then checking out the outputs, as I described, just looking at equality. And that's all about hiring. But, you asked a lot of other questions about like employee power. I think that I talk about, for example, pay. I've been very concerned with the gender and racial pay gaps in the market. And I show how actually it's not even AI, it's just the connectivity and digital platforms. And Seth, maybe you can add on just like organizing and employee voice and labor movement voice, just using platforms as a movement. So just like hashtag me too, that's part of the story of how we've managed to transform some of these organizations and just work conditions. Similarly with pay, just I talk about apps like LinkedIn kind of 3.0 that have just a little application that says know your worth, and suddenly people know their worth, when we've always had this like employer controls all the information about what people are paid, and we have this culture of taboo that we don't talk about each other's salaries. So I think that there's this huge opportunity to actually reverse that, what's always been the case, which is employer has a central control, operations, monitoring, surveillance, ability to, kind of very concentrated power. And yes, we've always tried to offset that with concerted activity and, labor power, but we know that, and I want to hear what you think about this, Seth, but we know that has not panned out to be a reality for the vast majority of workers who are not organized. So yeah, tell me a little bit about your thoughts on this.
Yeah, well, so I'll take on that last question about worker power, and thank you everybody for your comments in the Q&A and in the chat. I'm not sure we're going to be able to get to all of them because we're covering a lot of ground here. Uh, uh, to me, pretty clearly, the most effective way to ensure that worker voice is heard in the decision about how AI is going to be used and whether it's going to be used and for what purposes it's going to be used is collective bargaining. And we've seen successful examples of that just north of you in Los Angeles with the Hollywood strikes involving the actors and the writers and now the musicians. And there's now a negotiation going on with theatrical stage employees about how AI is used. But AI is being used very, very broadly, and only 10% of workers in the United States have a union. So most workers will not have a meaningful say in how artificial intelligence is deployed in the workforce, how it's deployed in the workplace, and also how it's deployed in the labor market. And so that's what got to my question about what mechanism can we use. I worry that the only answer is going to be government. And that we're going to have a law, and the law is going to have to be prescriptive. And because, I've spent so much of my career in government, I'm really skeptical about the ability to do that. Now, that doesn't lead me to the conclusion that AI is the doomsday machine. And a number of people in the comments have raised questions about whether or not AI sort of codifies the biases of the people who are teaching the AI, and are there examples of taking data that you use to train AI that is equality-driven data that ensures that the output will be equality-focused because the input is equality-focused? Very good questions from the audience here. And I think that is a very big question for us because, and this I want to pick up on Juan Pablo's point here, the most powerful force in American capitalism is profit. And what I worry about is that, like most decisions, or the large majority of decisions about how technologies are deployed, is that the most profitable use of technology will be the use that dominates, except in those circumstances where other powerful forces like government or unions or powerful organizations are able to intervene. So I wanted to give you a chance to comment on that, but I definitely want to get to why my computer speaks to me in a woman's voice. We'll get to that in just a minute, but I want to give you a chance to comment on this, my concern, my very real concern as somebody who thinks that AI could be immensely powerful for workers, immensely powerful for organizing, immensely powerful outside the labor market in a whole host of ways, that it can solve a lot of our problems, that there are serious challenges with it. But I worry that, like the internet, that AI will become a profit engine and that the decisions about it will be profit driven. Do you share that concern? And if you do, what do we do about it?
Yeah, I sure share the prediction and the instinct. I am a little maybe less concerned about the kind of profit side. I think we are, we are in a capitalistic society. We're in a global race for AI. So we're, there's I share a lot of concern about market concentration. So that's something that, you alluded to this with the FTC, with my first book, Talent Wants to Be Free. I've thought a lot about antitrust and the new frontiers of antitrust. And I'm thinking about it right now too, because there is a lot of important thinking that's being done right now. And I've done some of that work, even again, before AI, just about digital platforms, about how there is something of the natural monopoly characteristics of AI because of the huge need for computational power and data, that leads to these category kings, to just a set of few dominant actors. So that means that the market is not competitive, that it's not like the vision of a perfected market, that but so that's something that I care about. But I also think that AI will be a market. It is a market, and it should be that from a kind of good governance standpoint, it should always be like mostly developed in the private market, plus public options. I've already used that term earlier in our talk. I want to have public options, and I think that there's a lot of room for government intervention to require more data about just like what is out there, what are the outcomes to assess, to audit, and to also develop and procure for public uses. But on the kind of the question of labor power and unionization, so I mentioned this before. We've had a reality of the vast majority of our labor market not unionized for a long time, and I don't know that AI will has something to change, to do that, to reverse some of that. And I don't know that it can, or that we're heading to that. I'm putting more of my attention to all the opportunities that come with improving well-being in the market that we have, where we don't have most workers are experiencing the labor market without unionization. Again, I don't want to be heard, definitely not by you, Seth, as not excited about how we are in some sectors picking up numbers. That's all great. But I'm just not, seeing a great reversal, and not putting too much of my, like eggs in that the unionization basket. What I do think is that this is a very, like perfect storm, a very important moment for employment and labor policy to recognize that we've never struck the right deal here in the United States between our vision of employment relations and bundling them with distributive justice and social welfare. And I think AI is actually, this is very true about AI. It's inevitably going to put a big light on the fact that it's always been a politicized and historical kind of maybe path dependent, but just not some natural necessity that we've bundled too much of our livelihood and our human welfare on this concept of full-time employment. And this is something that I hear a lot about. I've actually written about the gig economy. You and I actually talked about the gig economy in China like a decade ago, where the Lobel model is kind of, look, we have to delink some of our social welfare from this conception of, people are going to have full-time employment. There's going to be inevitably, inarguably, massive disruptions right now in a lot of sectors. I think there's going to be a lot of job creation, but there's certainly going to be job losses and job changes, and it's for the first time, I think, unlike the agricultural and industrial and post-industrial revolutions, it's going all the way to the top. Like, the CEO and the investor and the programmer and the doctor and the attorney, and all of these professions are going to look differently. And that means that we have to invest a lot as a society in the transition, in the reskilling, in the envisioning of what jobs will look like, but also just in that delinking that we have to have, universal healthcare, and we have to have universal basic income, and we have to have housing, and stop taxing just labor. That's the biggest thing, right? Like, so we've always taxed labor much more than capital. We need to tax capital in a much more intense way. So that's my kind of shifting. What about labor power? Well, it is all part of the story, and I'll say one more thing, because I mentioned truckers, and I want to get your response on this. So, and this is, again, maybe it's ideological and political, and my stance is that when we do have life-saving technology, technology that has been proven to be outperforming humans, and we can argue about like whether the empirics are showing this, but if you and I agree on the facts that we have autonomous trucks that are safer than truck drivers, that 94% of all car accident, fatal car accidents are due to human error, and we can remove it, whether it's today or in 2 years, we need to deploy it, even if that means that jobs will be lost. We need to address the effects of job loss, absolutely, but not by slowing down the technology.
I agree with that. I am not a lobbyist for the Buggy Whip Manufacturers Association. There are jobs that disappear because of technology, and then there are jobs that are created because of technology. The problem is that our society is absolutely horrible at helping workers to transition, particularly those who lose their jobs, not just because of technology, but because of trade and other reasons. We just don't have a meaningful social safety net in the United States, and because we have such a low union density rate, we don't have unions that are able to step in and play that role, or works councils that you have in European economies and other social democratic economies, where there is a way to protect workers, and if you can't protect them, there is this really robust social safety net to protect them for a while they figure out what they're going to do next. We're among the worst in the developed world at dealing with that, and so the solution to me is not slam the brakes on technology as though you could do that anyway, as though there really is as though we're going to pass a law banning AI in the United States. That would be economically catastrophic and be morally challenging for a whole bunch of reasons. It's just a very problematic
But just,
approach.
as there was an attempt to, here in California, there was a bill that was actually passed by the California Assembly banning self-driving trucks, and Governor Newsom vetoed it. So it's not, and in other states, we have all these laws of like trying to ban all kinds of technologies, the use of technology, like in Illinois, the use of AI in employment decisions and things like that. So there are attempts. I think they're not they're not logical and not, based on the right normative assessments.
Right. And I'm okay with banning autonomous trucks until they are safe, autonomous vehicles until
Right.
they are safe. And I think that that's the role of government, is to make sure that technology doesn't cause harm, that it's used for good. And that's the challenge here, is that our governments are very, very slow to do that for all the reasons that you and I have studied over the years. Okay, I have to let you go because we have a hard stop at 6 o'clock Eastern time, 3 o'clock your time. I want to thank everybody for all of their comments. We could not get to all of them. There are a lot of them in the comments, so we will pass them along to Orly and see if we can find a way to share your comments and to maybe get into a dialogue. We can add some of them to the Power at Work blog. That will be an opportunity for you potentially to respond. But I know you all join me in thanking Orly Lobel for joining us to talk about the equality machine. Thank you very much to everybody in the live audience, and also to our blogcast audience who'll be looking at this in just a few days, for joining us for this Rebooting Democracy event. The Rebooting Democracy in the Age of AI lecture series is going to continue in fall 2024. Please sign up. Please sign up to receive updates at rebootdemocracy.ai. And we will put that link. Have we put that link in the chat yet? Aubrey and Joseph, if we put that link in the chat, if we haven't, let's put it in there. I think it's up at the top of the chat. Go look at it. And go to the Power at Work blog at poweratwork.us. Subscribe there so we can keep you updated on all of the content there, including this blogcast. We can also send you the weekly download, which every week collects 2 dozen or so stories, articles, videos, other things from the internet relating to workers, worker power, collective action, and unions. So thank you, everyone, for joining us. Delighted to have you here, Orly. So wonderful to see you. Thank you for this terrific book and for your presentation today.
Thank you. Such a pleasure to see you and